Working with clients online typically involves having some sort of a communication workspace, whether that's a message board, a task organizer, or even a documents manager. But we've seen way too many business owners spend too much time managing a Frankenstein toolset than actually helping their clients. Which is why in this video, you'll learn how to get started with building a custom client portal completely without code so that you can get back to actually helping your clients effectively. We're going to start by looking at a few different app examples that offer client portal functionality. The first one here is Super OK. This is all about customizing a client portal experience for anyone who has a relationship with clients where they need to collaborate online. This could be a coach, an advisor, a consultant, anything like that. So scanning through the different features that this particular application offers, we're looking at a dashboard for the client to have easy access to everything they need to collaborate on with their admin, documents and files, tasks, a knowledge base. There's even a place here to get access to additional services. And this is really common for client portal experiences, basically having access to all of the information they need to communicate with their admin effectively, right? So that's the first example. The next example here is Upcoach. This is specifically for coaches that may offer courses, perhaps a community of their students that they can collaborate with each other. And again, just going through the different features they offer here, tasks, the ability to track, progress with their tasks. There's also events that they can schedule and come together on. Here are the courses. This one even has a habit tracker, really popular with coaching programs. Here they also have a file management system, a forum, putting together agendas for any coaching sessions. Obviously, the coach or any kind of admin, on the other side of the portal needs to be able to manage all of their clients or students in some kind of a CRM. So we're going to talk about, the admin side of things as well. Moving into our next example, we have Zoho Practice, which is an individual product within the Zoho universe. Zoho is really popular for all sorts of business operation tools, and this is specifically for managing information within firms that work with clients. So if we look at kind of what their dashboard looks like, this is for the admin side. So the priority features in this type of product is more to support the business, give them reports, be able to manage internal tasks, but at the same time offering collaboration features so that firm users can communicate with their clients properly. So whether that's an internal chat, like we see here, or again, document management, that's a very popular feature. Any tasks that they may want to collaborate on with their clients, not just internally. And if the application is also tied to invoicing, any kind of accounting features, you could work in sending out invoices, requesting signatures or approvals on work, all under one roof. The idea, behind all of these different client portals is that communication is easier. Information can be organized in one place so that you're not dealing with a mess of emails and, documents spread out through different drives and things like that. And then our final example here is more of an individual feature. So Stripe, which is a payment gateway, offers a customer portal feature so that you can make it really easy for your paying customers to manage their billing details. So when we're talking about creating a customer portal, it doesn't have to be, an entire application. It could be sort of a subset feature within a larger application. And the way that Stripe has handled this is they've built out this really easy to use billing management system that is accessible to the paying customer. They can change their subscription plan, they can cancel, they can switch out their payment methods, add another card or add a bank account. They can see their invoice history, right? All in one place. And for a business, you can integrate with Stripe so that clients or customers can access their portal without having to do anything fancy. They'll click on a button and through API integrations, they can move directly into a screen that looks like this so that they can manage all of the billing details in a really convenient way. Some of the common features that we saw in those example apps include messaging, task management, document management. These are features that allow the admin and client to collaborate on information all in one place so that it's easier to communicate and move projects forward. Now, every industry and individual business will also have its own set of features that are unique. That's very normal. It doesn't actually matter what functionality you have in your client portal, the key to creating a secure client portal system is how you organize the data structure behind the scenes so that the right people can get access to the right data. Now, I'm going to be walking you through an example application. We'll even jump into a Bubble editor so that you can see how to get started with setting up a system for this purpose. In our example application, we have 3 screens that I'm going to walk you through so that you can see how to approach this sort of system. The first screen is an admin screen. So as an admin in the admin-client relationship, you need a place to manage all of your clients. So we have sort of a CRM system here. All of my clients have contact information, first name, last name, email, and a status. So in our example, a client can be active, inactive. We can see whether an invitation has been sent out, but they have not yet taken ownership over their account, or they may be in a draft state. The admin can then select a specific client and then go to that client's portal. So I'm going to switch over to that screen here. So this is the client's portal from the admin perspective. Notice that there's this bar up at the top where I can go back to my admin dashboard, and I can also switch quickly here to a different client if I wanted. I can go from Phoebe over to Joey. We can see some information has changed here. So this makes it really easy for an admin that has many clients to kind of toggle between these different data sets without having to go across many different screens to get there. Now, the key thing that's happening here within this portal is that everything is tied to the selected client, whether it's the documents or the tasks, the messages, and even this activity feed that you see here. Everything is tied to the selected client. If I switch over again back to Phoebe, now all of the information is only looking at things that are tied to Phoebe. And we're going to look at how to construct all of this behind the scenes so that you don't have client information bleeding between different people and getting incorrect results. The client themselves will also have access to this portal, but they'll only be able to see their own information. They actually won't have this bar up at the top because they're not an admin. And then the third screen we have is a login system for the client and the admin so that they can enter the application securely. If the client has received an invitation, they'll go through an extra step to sort of complete a registration, right? Just kind of those initial steps, and then they can move into their appropriate dashboard from there. So there are 2 things that we're going to be focused on here to accomplish this type of functionality. First is your database structure, so that any information that's created is always linked back to a client. And then the second is the page access permissions for the front end, right? It doesn't matter what your pages look like, doesn't matter how many pages you have or how you want to lay things out. It also doesn't matter what data that you're working with. The structures behind the scenes that create the right relationships and access rights for the users are the keys here to create a secure client portal for both the client side as well as the admin side. Let's take a look at our data structure to support all of these features. I'm going to start with the user data type. This is the built-in data type that comes with every Bubble application. Anyone who needs to be able to log into the app needs to have a user record. So there will be an email address and password that Bubble will be able to manage securely so that you can log in, log out, things like that. Now within our user data type, we've also added some custom fields. We have some self-explanatory fields, first name, which is a text, last name, also a text, and a last login field, which is a date. We're actually going to timestamp every single time a user logs in so that, let's say, for example, the admin wants to be able to track the client's level of activity in the application. They can do so with that field. We also have 2 separate fields here that are tied to option sets. Option sets allow us to create predetermined lists of choices. So the first one is our client status set. This helps us see whether the client is active or not in the app. Now we have different kind of levels here to be a little bit more granular with it. So the client can be active, right? They're able to access the portal, we're actively working with them. Or they can be inactive. Maybe they've suspended their account, maybe we're waiting on a payment, or they've decided to close their account, but we want to hold on to their data for a period of time. We have invitation sent, which essentially means that they are active, but we're pending kind of a registration completion, an onboarding sequence that they still need to go through before we really get going. And then a draft status, which is really the first status that they enter into when we are organizing them in our CRM, in our admin page, but we're not yet ready to send out that invitation. Now that's going to be one of the fields within the user data type, right? That way each user will be one of these choices. If we go over to our app data to see the users that we have currently in the system, you'll see that Here's our field, client status, and we've got a mix of choices there. Now this field over here is also tied to an option set called user role, and for this particular option set we have two choices. A user can either be an admin or a client, because at the end of the day, everyone who needs to be able to log into the application has to have a user record, right? That's where the credentials are stored behind the scenes. So this field helps us separate what type of user they are. And ultimately, it helps us understand what pages they'll be able to access, especially after login, right? Where are we going to direct them? Now, you can take this further. Maybe it's not as simple as one single admin. Maybe you have to have a team member or a coach and a consultant, different types of people that work on the admin side that are engaging with different clients. Maybe even on the client side, you have guests or co-clients, right? It's completely up to you. The more specific you are with the different types and roles, the more granular you can get with your permissions, okay? So this is what we have in our example. Now our next data type, which is our custom data type that we've created here called document, this is going to serve one of our modules of information, collaboration spaces in the portal. Going back into the front end here, you can see that there's different things that we can do within the portal. And we've just set up the document section to kind of show you an example of what collaborating on data could look like. Ultimately, the principles that we're applying here can work the exact same for any other type of data. Really, the key is that you're setting up the right relationships within your data records so that, when it comes to designing, accessing this information on the front end side, you're able to filter things properly. So for every unique type of data, I would recommend you create a separate data type. So I have a data type here for document. If I wanted to work with meetings or events, sessions, things like that, I would have a separate data type for that where I can store those details in their own table, right? A session could have a date, a description, maybe a meeting link, things like that. So for our document, we have a field for the actual file that's being uploaded as well as the file name. And we also have a relationship to a client. This field is really important. Any data type that's going to work with data that is unique to a client, you want to make sure that they all have this field that links that custom record to one of your users. And in this case, it's going to be one of your client users. Okay, this way, when I'm looking at documents and I go to upload a file, let's just click on this real quick here so I can show you. I'm going to upload this sample document like this. All right, I'm currently logged in as Monica, who is one of my admins, and notice that I'm within Phoebe's portal here, and I'm going to call this sample for demo 123. Okay, I'll save the document, and the record has been created. I can even open it up. I click on this link here. There's my sample document, and if I go back into the database, we can see here is the record that I just created. There's the file name, there's the actual file that's been uploaded, and the client that this record is tied to is Phoebe. If I go and switch over to, let's say, Rachel, notice that that goes away because we have logic in our design that filters out documents that aren't related to the selected client. And if I was logged in as Phoebe right now, I would be seeing this same view here as well. Back in our data structure, our other data type that we have created is called activity item. And this is allowing us to create a sort of feed, as you can see down here, of all the activity that's going on throughout the portal. And this can be really helpful if you do have a lot of different functionality and everybody sort of needs to be notified and updated on what's going on, what's the latest, especially if there's notifications involved, if you're sending emails at the same time, or even in-app notifications, if there are action items that need to be taken as soon as, let's say, a document has been signed or a task has been added to the system, right? Being able to see things in this kind of feed-like manner is very helpful. So we've created a separate data type to organize individual activity items. Every activity item, again, is going to be tied to a specific client, right? I don't want to be seeing activity items from other clients here. I just want to see activity that's related to this client, whether I triggered something as an admin, maybe I assigned a task to the user, or if the client themselves uploaded a document, signed a document, something like that. Right, so you've got to make sure that you have that field relationship. And then we have other fields to help us manage details around that activity. So we have a timestamp for when the activity occurred, who triggered the activity. So this is either going to be the admin or the client themselves. one of the two. And then also a categorization field here for us. We have another option set for activity type. These are just some samples here for, common things that you might find in a client portal, document related activities, tasks, messages, things like that. And we'll take a look in a bit here in the workflows when it's appropriate to create the activity record so that everything shows up in real time. So now I'm going to walk you through the full client onboarding flow from the perspective of the admin and the newly invited client so that you can see what both of their experiences are like on the front end. Then we'll dig into the editor to see how all of the logic was put together to make these things happen. Okay, so from the admin's perspective, they'll get started by creating a new client with an email address. So we're going to add emma@mailinator.com. We're going to be using the Mailinator system to test the email invitation. So I'm going to click on new client, and we can see a new row has been added to our table here. Emma is by default in a draft status. We can see that email carried over. And I'm going to enter in Emma's first name, but not a last name, because we'll see that Emma will be able to edit her details as a part of the user registration on her side of things. Now, whenever we click on select, based on the user's status, we're going to have different action items up at the top. So there's some conditional logic here happening in our design. A client that is in a draft state will be able to send an invitation. For an active client, we can just go directly to their portal. For someone who already has an invitation sent, like Joey, we don't have another action item to take. We can just delete them, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and send Emma her invitation by clicking on this button here. We'll see that alert message there. We can see that Emma's status has changed automatically. So let's go over to Mailinator, and we can see there's the email address that came from the application sent to Emma's inbox. There's our subject line. Here's our sender name. So I'm going to open this up, and we have some sample, content in this email so you can see what an invitation could look like via email. So we're saying hello to the person we've invited. We have the name of the admin that triggered the invitation and instructions to help the user get started. So we're going to go over to the login page. This is just our URL to go to that screen. And here are the credentials for Emma. So behind the scenes, when we sent that invitation, we also created a temporary password for Emma. So I'm actually going to copy this, and let's head over to the login screen. I'm going to log out of here from the admin perspective. So Emma's email will go here, emma@mailinator.com, and the temporary password in this field, click on login. And we're taken to a second step. And this is a conditional step in the workflow because we can detect that Emma is an invited client that hasn't completed their registration. Notice that the email address and first name have auto-populated for us. So I'm going to enter in Emma's last name, and now Emma can basically take ownership over this account by setting up a new password, and she no longer has to use that temporary. So I'm going to set up a new password and confirm, and now click Save Details and Continue. Account has been updated, and we're going to be taken to the portal. Notice that from Emma's perspective, Emma is a client. That bar that we had at the top there for the admin is hidden, right? Because Emma isn't an admin. She's just a client, and she'll only have access to her own data. And also, we don't have any activity here because nothing has happened yet within this account. This is a brand new account. So if I go into the Documents module, I'm going to upload a sample file. Let's do this sample video file that we have here. And I believe this is a rotating Earth video that we have. I'm going to click on Save. All right, so there's my file. We know that it was triggered by Emma Green just a few seconds ago. If I click on this, it'll open up that video. There it is. Okay, and if I go back to the dashboard, I can see there's the first item in my activity feed that basically lets both me and my admin know that this item has just occurred, or this action has taken place. All right, now if I log out and then I go to log back in, let's do emma@mailinator.com again. And now with my new password, I'm going to click on login. Notice that I skip over that registration step because I've already completed it. Now I'm just going straight to my portal here. So the user doesn't have to go through that all over again. From here, if the user wanted to modify their email or their name, we could take them to a dedicated settings area where they could accomplish those tasks. Now back on the admin screen, I'm logged back in here as Monica. We can see that Emma's status has changed to active. That happened automatically when Emma completed that new client registration form. And so now I can select Emma and actually go to her portal. Again, from the perspective of an admin, I have this bar up at the top again, and I also see that same activity item. And I have access to this because of my user role being admin. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this helpful, we have a free extended workshop over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. This is where we'll guide you through our 4-phased approach to take you from idea to app. So if you're looking for a structured start to finish guide, you're going to love this workshop. There's a lot of great stuff in there. So we've got the link right now on the screen and in the description below, so you can check it out. So now I'm going to jump into the editor to give you an overview of how these features came to life. The first thing I want to touch on are page level restrictions. This is something you want to pay attention to for all of your screens that you're designing in your app. For example, we're on the admin page right now. If I jump over to the workflows, there are 2 workflow events here that address access to this page. The first is when the user is detected as being logged out. If we don't know who they are, we can't give them access to this screen. So we're going to redirect them to our login page. Okay, they could be an admin, but we need them to go through the proper channels, the proper flow to take them back here once they are logged in. The second workflow event is, let's say the user is detected as being logged in, but they are the wrong role, right? So we have a condition here that says when the current user's role is client, this is looking at our option set, then we're going to, again, redirect them back to the login screen. And on that screen, it will route them appropriately to where they need to go. You want to pay very close attention to that with all of your screens, especially when you have different user permissions involved. Now let's look at a couple important functions here with our admin controls. So the first thing is they need to be able to create a new client. So clicking on this button, see that we have an email address input next to this so that they can kick things off. This is going to, let's go over to this flow, create a new account for somebody else. Notice that this is not a sign up action, right? I'm not signing up as a new user. I'm creating another account for someone else. And we need to provide that email address, just bare minimum, to get a new user record created. At the same time, I'm also going to default a couple things for this new account right off the bat. So client status is going to equal draft. That's again from our option set list of choices, and role equals client, again from that other option set. Bubble is giving me the appropriate choices here because these fields have been defined appropriately in the user record, right? This is going back to the beginning where we set up those definitions for each of those fields, okay? So we know that from this particular button click, we're creating a specific type of user, a client that is in the draft status, right? Then we'll also reset the input to give the admin a little visual cue that everything is going through. They'll actually have a bigger visual cue in the fact that that new user record will show up as a new row in this table here. So this table is going to be pulling from a specific search of users in our database, right? We have a search expression here. This is a constrained search. We're only interested in seeing users where the role equals client. That way it filters out any other admins we may have in the system. So every row in this table will represent a different client user. Inside of the row, we have various inputs to auto-populate with that client's details. Again, these are all of the field values we have defined in the data structure. Notice, for example, in the status drop-down here, we are pulling from our option set. And in the default value, we do have this pre-populating with the user's status. That way, whatever they are now, that's exactly what we'll display as soon as we load the page. You may also see that we're taking advantage of auto binding here. This allows us to auto save changes to those fields as soon as the user interacts with the input, so we don't have to go through other workflows. Now, the selection flow is going to leverage a custom state to keep track of which client has been selected. Notice that, if I choose Joey, I have a couple things happening. The check mark is added to the button design, and we also have a button that shows up. If I select Rachel, notice that Joey's check mark goes away, and now Rachel has the check mark. And also Rachel has another action to add because Rachel's status is a little different from Joey's. So there's multiple things kind of working together so we get the right visual changes for the user to help them understand, kind of keep them oriented, right? Who have I just selected, and what possible actions can I take with this particular person who, based on their status, has or has not gone through certain steps in our overall business flow. Okay, so a custom state is being used to keep track of who we've selected. Every time we click on this button, it's either going to modify the state to set it to that row's user, or modify the state to clear that value. It just depends on whether that was the person that was already selected or if they haven't yet been selected. That custom state is also going to dictate the visibility properties of these buttons. We have a group that holds all three buttons that is basically acting as a shortcut. It's going to set that custom state as its data source. We're using this to help consolidate further expressions within these individual buttons here. But at the end of the day, if there is a selected person, one or more of these buttons will display. So we have different conditions on the buttons themselves, right? So for example, if the user's status is active, then we can show the go to portal button, versus if the status is draft, then we show the invitation button. The delete button is always going to display. There's no condition there. We want that to always be available. And that's a pretty straightforward workflow action. It's just a delete data record action. Now, in reality, you may want to have this be a two-step process. Whenever you delete things, you may want to give your users a chance to back out of that action. You don't want to have accidental deletes. There's a lot of different ways you can design this. You could have a pop-up to say, hey, are you sure? Maybe type in your password again to confirm the process. Otherwise, this is just an immediate deletion of that record. So let's look at this send invitation workflow. There's a couple of things happening here. The first is we're going to assign the user a temporary password. This way the user has something to log in with to start that they can then change and take ownership over the account. But this is a Bubble action. Bubble will be creating the password for you, and it will also link it to that user. Then we're going to send the user an email. This is basically a notification that says, hey, we've created an account for you. Log into this page. We're directing them to the login screen that we've created. Here are your credentials, right? There's the email, there's the password. It's just the result of step one, so that you can get started. You notice that we're also personalizing it by referencing the user's name, also referencing the admin's name so that they know who triggered the invitation. This is completely up to you and how you want to design this, right? This is how that email looked with that example we went through a little earlier. It just gives them all the information they need to move forward. Let's see, jumping back into the workflow here, we're also going to update the status. As soon as we've sent this email, now we can change them to an invitation sent status. That way we know we're waiting on them to take the next step before they become an active client. We're also going to show a little alert message so that we give the user another visual cue that that is done. So as soon as that invitation is sent, the status will change, the admin will see it here in the table, and they can move on to whatever else they need to do in the application. Now, go to portal. Let's go to this workflow here. This is a single action that's just going to navigate the admin to the portal page. This is a different page in the app, and I want to point out this setting right here. We are sending a reference to the selected client over to the portal page. This concept is taking advantage of a built-in system that Bubble has for creating dynamic pages, which essentially allows me to create a single portal page that both the admin user and the client user can go to, while still having some conditional capabilities on the screen so that, maybe the admin only sees this bar here. Maybe the client is only able to access the knowledge base. Right, settings can maybe work a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, it is still the exact same page. Okay, that's a really critical piece there for a portal system that you actually want to share between both admin and client in the exact same way. All right, now let's move into the login flow so that you can follow kind of the steps that that new invited client needs to take. Okay, so the first thing they're going to see is this login group here. Very straightforward, email and password. They'll enter in their temporary. They'll click on the login button. First step is to actually log the user in, right? This way Bubble can check the credentials and recognize that, yes, there is a user account in the system for them, or not. If there's an error there, Bubble will display an alert message. But if they are logged in successfully, we're going to timestamp basically the last time they logged in. This is again for any analytics. If you want to track how frequently people are engaging with the app, it's helpful to do this. And then we're going to split based on the status of the user, because this is a login screen that the admin can also use, right? So we have a split workflow here that will either take us into this custom event or this custom event. Okay, a custom event is essentially a workflow that's triggered by another workflow. It really helps you create specific sequencing of your flows and conditional flows here. So for step 3, we have a condition that says only when the user's status is active, or if they're just an admin, right? Doesn't matter what status they are because admins don't really fall under the status. If they're active client or they're an admin, they're considered an active user. So they're going to go into this flow here. Going back, otherwise, if they are in the invitation sent status, right? And that assumes that they are a client, but we're just kind of, we created a little safety net here with they got to make sure that they're a client. If they're an invited client, then they're going to follow this flow because there's still an extra step they need to take to complete their registration. Okay, so for that invited user, we're going to hide the login group and show our registration group. This is on the same page. We have a hidden group here that is waiting for us to enter in that custom flow. They'll confirm all of their details. They can enter in or change their details if they want. And this is also where they define their new password. Clicking on Save Details and Continue is going to save all of those changes and then take them back into the active user flow. Now that they've completed these steps of updating their credentials, as well as making any changes to their name, notice that we're also now making them active. Now we can feed them back into ultimately the flow we want everybody to get to at some point, is the active flow, right? So the invited user is going to kind of take a detour for a moment, and then they'll eventually save their details and come back into active. Once we're in this flow here, this is where we finally navigate them to the appropriate page, either the admin page or the portal page. So they go to the admin page. This is not labeled properly. Let's rename it real quick right now. There we go. We only want to go to the admin page if the user's role is admin, and then we only want to go to the portal page if the user's role is client. Now notice here, because this is from a login perspective, the user who is logging in and going through this whole process, if they're a client, we want the data to send to be their own record. That's different from that admin page that we looked at where they click on the go to portal page. They actually have to send in the selected user because an admin can go to any client. But a client who is logging in themselves, they should only send their own record to the portal so that they're only looking at their own details. They can't get to another client's information. Okay, so now going over to the portal screen, this bar up at the top, this is a floating group that we have that's always going to be sticky at the top no matter how tall this page is or how much height it has. But this is a conditional group. So by default, if we go to the layout tab, notice that it's not visible on page load. It should only be visible if the role is admin. So we only have admin functions here. This button up at the top, it's a simple navigation action that takes us back to the admin page. Nothing else going on there. And then this drop down here, which is showing us all of our client users. And in reality, I noticed earlier that this status should really be restricted to our active clients because only active clients are going to have portal data. So this narrows our, let's actually refresh the page here. I'm going to refresh this. This narrows the list that we see, right? These are only our active users. Technically, we do have other users in the system. Okay, so back to our editor. This drop down, as soon as a change is made, it's going to reload the page. Let's go over to the workflow here, right? As soon as this is changed, it's going to reload the page by going to it again, right? We're already on the portal page. So when we say go to page portal, the page that we're currently on, we're really asking Bubble to do more of a soft reload. It's not a hard refresh. It's really just changing the data source behind the scenes. And in this case, the data to send is whatever selected user we chose from this drop down. Okay, so you see we've used this go to page portal action in 3 different places, the admin page, the login, as well as the portal page itself. And depending on the context of the page and where our data sources are, the expression we're using to populate this field is going to be a little different. So you got to be very aware of what value needs to go in there so that you land on the right page with the right information sent in. Okay. Now a few other things going on the screen here. We have our kind of primary dashboard screen is sort of the starting point for the user to choose kind of what module they want to go into. So we have these big buttons that in theory are meant to hide the dashboard and show whichever module you want to see. Now we've only set this up for the documents because the same principle should apply for everything, no matter which module you choose. So I have 2 groups right now. I've got my dashboard group up at the top, and then I have my documents group down below. My dashboard group is the one that's visible by default. So here, this element is visible on page load, that's checked. But my documents group is not, that's hidden. that makes it so that when I first load the page, I'm not seeing my documents at the same time, or my tasks and messages and meetings, right? It's just this first group here. If I were to click on documents, let's go to that workflow. This is going to show the documents group, hide the dashboard group, right? And so that's exactly what I get when I click here. And I also have a button that does the reverse. Back to portal dashboard, hides the documents group, and shows the dashboard group. The main thing I want to call out is when you're creating information, you just got to make sure that you assign a relationship to the client in the record, right? So I have a file uploader here. We have an input to enter in the file name. This workflow, save the document, is going to create our document record, map all the fields from our inputs, the file uploader to the file field, the file name value to the file name field, and the client equals, here it is, current pages user. It's not the current user. The current user is the person who is logged in and engaging with the app. This document is getting created as in a relationship with the client. All documents created either by the admin or the client themselves needs to have a relationship with the client. You can kind of think of this client field as sort of an account. So whether you label it account or organization or customer, whatever the word is, you got to make sure that all of your data records that should be organized under that account have a relationship to that primary data source. Okay, and in this case, it's the pages user. It's whoever, whichever client we've decided to look at in this moment. In addition to this, I'm also creating an activity item. So if you recall, we want to kind of track all of the different activity these users are taking whenever a document is uploaded, a task is completed. And so this is one of those actions. And you would have this action for every workflow where the action actually occurs. So one of our actions is when a document is uploaded. So we're going to not just create the document, but also this independent activity item so we can display it in an activity feed. Again, client equals the current pages user. Our timestamp is the current date and time, right? Right now, this is when it happened. It was triggered by the current user. This is a person actually clicking on the button. And then the type of activity, in this case, it's document uploaded. So I just selected from my list of choices, my option set, and hard-coded it here, because that's the only thing that's going to happen when the user clicks on this particular button. Now down below, let me actually hide my dashboard group for a sec. Here, okay. Down below, I have a repeating group that is going to display all of the documents for this client. This is another area where you have to make sure that you have these constraints so that as you switch clients, from the admin's perspective, or if it's the client themselves, that they are only accessing the data that is related to that client, right? That client or account record. So these constraints are very, very important. From here, it doesn't matter what else you do. It's just the restriction that's the key thing, so that you don't have data bleeding between accounts. So now let's go back to our dashboard group so you can see how that feed came together. I'm going to display this and I'm going to hide my documents group. Very similar setup here. We have another repeating group of our activity items, again, filtered on the client. We have it sorted by the timestamp, and inside we've just designed all the information related to that activity so that it helps the user understand, what type of activity, who, and when in this kind of display here. So from here, any other modules that you add into the portal is going to work similar to the documents, where you just need to make sure you have that relationship to the client record in both in the workflow to create the record as well as in displaying it back to the user. At the end of the day, the main thing that separates a client portal type of application from any other type is the access, and that is controlled by your data structures as well as your access logic within your page designs. All right, I hope this was helpful, and if it was, the content you're about to see on the next screen will help you take things even further.